church. We have already been through this great Christmas season, the preparation before that Advent season. And it seemed like the entire thing for such a long period of time was all about babies and love and peace and joy. This past week we had the baptism of Jesus, and then all of a sudden we're kind of slapped in the face by today's gospel reading. John is arrested. Jesus recognizes this to be his moment when he needs to begin his public message, his public life. And his message in today's gospel is, repent, for the kingdom of God is at hand. All of a sudden, things seem to have changed dramatically. And it is already that we are anticipating the Lenten season. But today's gospel reading was so short, I thought that I would utilize another reading to try to make my points a little bit clearer. And I can't remember which book this came from, but you will probably recall it as well, because it goes like this. Little Jack Horner sat in a corner eating his Christmas pie. He put in his plum, pulled out a thumb, and said, "What a good boy am I." And of course, you're probably already realizing that what I'm going to talk about today is, why do we gotta go to church? You know, I heard this Protestant and Catholic having a discussion on the radio this past week. And the Protestant said something along the lines of, the problem with your Catholics is that you don't have any kind of immediate relationship with God. Everything has to be mediated. There's like something that exists between you and God, like the sacraments. He was saying that within that Protestant experience, everything can be just God and me. So the question is there such a relationship as something that exists between just God and me itself? And if there is, why do I have to go to church? Can I just stay at home and be holy and prayerful and spend 1 hour by myself thinking good thoughts, thinking spiritual things, praying? Well, the answer is no. And actually, there's a twofold part to that answer. No, because you won't. Now, this is the time of New Year's resolutions, and you're thinking to yourself, well, this is going to be my New Year's resolution, is on Sundays I'm going to pray by myself. And you may do that for a few weeks, but after a few weeks, like all New Year's resolutions, it'll go to the wayside. But the other problem associated with trying to be holy by yourself is that you can't. There is no such thing for a human being to have a direct experience with God. Every single experience you have is a mediated experience. The words that you heard, the epistle, the gospels, the words that I'm speaking now, come to you through another person. Your mother, probably, or your parents, your siblings, your friends. The light that we see is not something that we experience directly, but it has to be transformed within our minds into something that we can make sense of. And the same can be said for every sensual organ. Every experience that we have as human beings is mediated. We have no immediate experience of anything, really. Everything is kind of taught to us. Except there's kind of like this little spark that lives within us. Have you ever heard of the term synderesis? Now, synderesis is a Greek term, but this is really more common within scholastic philosophy. Scholastic philosophy was like the Middle Ages. People like Thomas Aquinas and Bonaventure and Duns Scotus. But what synderesis means is that each and every single one of us has a divine spark. A sort of like the hardware that we utilize to make moral decisions. Now this is different than making a moral decision. It's sort of like it represents the hardware that we utilize to help us make that decision. Synderesis is the hardware, and our morality, our conscience, represents the software. We have to take every experience as it comes, and we have to make sense of it. But that morality, that conscience, is something that has to be formed. It is not something that exists ordinarily within us. It is something that we have to learn. Okay, so we're coming to church to hear the Word, because as I said, we have no immediate experience with God. We come to church to form our conscience so that we can act properly. But perhaps the most important reason why we have to come to church is because of everybody else that comes to church. Now, all of us mean something to each of us. You know, there's that time when I do my incensations where I come back, and the last thing that I incense is you. And the reason why I incense you last is because you represent the best iconic representation of Jesus Christ. You are the living embodiment of Jesus Christ yourself. And each and every single one of us is an iconic representation to each and every one of us of an even more invisible reality. And that invisible reality is that there are so many people in our lives that we never even consider that are absolutely essential to our well-being, to our comfort, to our humanity, to our spirituality. I'm talking about the farmer who grows our food, the rancher who raises the cows, the trucker who brings them to market. But every single one of us participates in every single one of our lives, either directly or indirectly. The guy who fixes the electrical lines, for example. Even something as mundane as a tire salesman. All of these people participate and enlighten our lives. And those of us who grow up in the city often forget about that. We have lost touch with the fact that we are so in need of each other just for our day-to-day existence. You're probably thinking about now is, what's this got to do with Jack? Well, it's got everything to do with Jack. If you think about this curious little rhyme, it is absolutely sublime in its meaning. You take little Jack, and he's sitting in a corner. Why is he sitting in the corner? Well, obviously, he must have been misbehaving. But he's eating his Christmas pie, and you're thinking to yourself, how does he get dessert if he's been a bad boy and has to sit in the corner? And then we find out that he starts playing with his food. And it ends up with him saying, what a good boy am I. Well, when we try to pray by ourselves, it's sort of like little Jack sitting in the corner. The only thing we see are those two bare walls. And the only person that is obvious to us is ourselves. And the decisions that we make are for ourselves. Our morality is designed for ourselves, and not for purposes of reaching out to those who are around us. And because of the greatness of God, we are still able to meet or even exceed our appetites. Things like hunger and thirst and such things. We are still able to enjoy our lives despite the fact that we have put ourselves in the corner. And what happens in a situation like this, with a conscience that is not properly formed, is we end up misusing those appetites in ways for which those appetites were not intended. And at the end of the day, we come back with the conclusion that I, as a person, am good enough, that I, as a person, as just like little Jack, am whole. So in conclusion, don't be like Jack. Because when you're like Jack, you have to sit in the corner. And when you sit in your corner, you have to eat your Christmas pie that has like plums and stuff in it. And when you get your Christmas pie, you're just going to play with it. And you're not really a good boy after all. So don't be like Jack. Go to church at least once a week. Christ is baptized.